it's time for an update. I hope my microphone is working okay. Point it that way. um, let's make sure. It's got a very handy clip that is hard to undo. Okay. Anyway, so I wanted to give an update, health update. So I've been having menopause. Well, I thought it was menopause problems for a long time. Um, so let's see. At the age of 32, I started having really heavy periods and PMS like 3 months, 3 weeks out of the month. I started just being miserable 3 weeks out of the month. And at one point, my OBGYN had mentioned to go on birth control, but I was like, well, I don't, I want to do it natural. A year after that, I went in and said, okay, natural is not working. Natural, I am miserable 3 weeks out of the month. So I went on birth control pills for 20 years. I went on it for a year. I go into my OBGYN a year into it, and she goes, you don't need to stop taking the pill for a week so you can have a period. You can just take it continuously now. And so I did for 20 years. And I was so happy. I was so happy. I was feeling great. I was also on antidepressants, Wellbutrin at the time. So I was feeling really fantastic. For 20 years, I felt great. Like I didn't have to go through a period. I was on my antidepressant. I was just happy, happy, happy. um, then I think it was 2017. I was training for a bodybuilding competition, and one of my coaches said maybe I should go off the pill. It's not good for you to do that for so long. Blah blah blah. I did a little research. There was mixed research about it's fine to stay on the onward pill continuous, and maybe it's not so fine. So uh, I convinced myself to go off to experiment with seeing if I was in menopause. At this time, 2017, let's see, this is 2021. I'm 57. 2020, 19, 18. Anyway, it was a few years ago, and I thought, well, maybe I'll be in menopause because my brother's wife had gone off the pill, and turned out she was in menopause, and she went through menopause. She was 57, I think, at the time, or 54, 55, I don't know. Anyway, so I went off to see if I'd go into menopause. Well, all of a sudden, I had these horrible, heavy, awful, terrible, awful, heavy periods. I'm like, oh, this sucks, And I found out now they make ultra tampons, which thank goodness, and your pads are very thin now, which is good. Thank goodness for ultra tampons, though. Those did not exist back in the old days. So I struggled. I struggled to figure out how to live through those periods, and I finally kind of figured out a system a little bit. Oh my gosh. Tampons plus pads plus, you know, I finally realized after years of this to wear some shorts also at night so you don't have a mess. Oh my gosh, it's just awful. So I since have talked to a lot of women that have gone through a lot of the same thing. I thought, well, maybe this is, premenopausal. So I just waited it out to see if I'd go into menopause. 2 or 3 years goes by, and 2 years goes by. I'm like, forget this. I'm going back on the pill. So I went to Planned Parenthood to get back on the pill because I hadn't seen an OBGYN for 2 years at that point. Uh, I had taken a little break after all those years of going to an OBGYN every year. So I went to Planned Parenthood. They gave me the pill, and they said, maybe you should go back to your OBGYN. So I did. I went back to my OBGYN. She ran a bunch of tests. Nothing was cancerous, So I went on the pill for a year, and I still had, a year goes into it, I still have spotting every day, I think, for a year. I'm like, I'm so sick of this spotting. She's like, that's not good. You shouldn't have spotting. I'm like, really? Because it's much better than bleeding to death for a year, all these years, couple of years. I thought it was better. She said, no, I'm not supposed to spot. So then she did more tests. She still didn't know what the problem was. She recommended a hysterectomy. I don't want a hysterectomy. I grew up when they said too many women get hysterectomy. So I didn't want to be just a statistic for who knows why. So I said, no, I don't want a hysterectomy. I want to figure this out. So at the same time, I had been lagging for a couple of years, just thinking I was out of shape and too fat. Turned out I was super anemic. I asked for a blood test when I went back to my OBGYN, and turned out I was really low in red blood cells. I was very anemic. So I ended up getting referred, thank goodness, to a clinic that could provide me with some IV iron. Well, this clinic that I got referred to is super nice. They're an oncology clinic. They also do chemotherapy and all that stuff. So the good news is I got a nice, checkup from an oncologist to make sure nothing else was wrong. And he said, no, you don't have cancer or anything. Let's just. And at first I just took pills, iron pills, and that worked. But then a couple years later, I got anemic again. And this time I went for an IV iron. Well, anyway, I've been since then following through with getting regular checkups from the oncologist office that knows what panels to run for red blood cells, because my regular doctor or OBGYN just runs, a simple red blood cell. The oncology office runs 3 or 4 panels, and they get a better look. They have a much more evaluation of what's going on with my red blood cells and width and all that. So they're much better, much more expert at it. So I keep going with them to follow my how my blood iron is doing, which is good. So anyway, the oncologist office said, you need to fix the problems to stop being anemic. I'm like, yeah, we're working on it. Well, this February, I got an ablation. My gynecologist recommended an ablation also. So I said, I'll go with the ablation rather than hysterectomy. So I did that this year, 57 years old. Went to the hospital, went under anesthesia, was really scared about it. Took a few weeks to recover from the anesthesia. I was really tired from the anesthesia, but the procedure itself was not a big deal to recover from. Well, a month later, I start bleeding again. I'm like, oh, no. So I go back to my gynecologist, and she's like, I don't know what the problem is. You should get a hysterectomy. I don't know what the problem is. I'm like, you don't know what the problem is. I'm thinking, why don't you consult with someone and find out what the problem is? So I went on Google and researched my own expert. I researched, since I'm in Washington State, University of Washington, menopause expert research. And I pulled up on Google a bunch of articles with a name of a doctor. And I called to the University of Washington, and they said, yeah, she's here. I said, well, does she take patients? Yes, she's taking patients. I'm like, really? I called my insurance agency to see if they'd cover, my insurance would cover her. Yes, they cover. So I'm like, great, I'll make an appointment. So I made an appointment with her, the expert, a menopause expert. I go up there and I say, here's what's been going on. I don't want a hysterectomy. She's like, I understand that. We can figure that out. I'm like, great. Get some more blood tests, check my hormone level. Turns out later, my hormone level was not in menopause yet. Progesterone is almost non-existent, but estrogen was really high. So she said I'm still going toward menopause. Since then, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. And there's a lot of information out here on YouTube. So research on YouTube. So anyway, she said track what's going on, which I already did anyway. So a few weeks later, month later, I'm bleeding again. I'm like, oh. I call up there. She's on leave. Oh. For the whole month of June. So her team fortunately covered the problem. I went back up there, got an ultrasound, got a diagnosis on the ultrasound. After all this, I was so happy. Called adenomyosis, which is where your uterine lining gets too thick because the cells have migrated from the muscle to the uterus lining, created more blood vessels, too much bleeding, cramping, bleeding, and that's exactly what I experienced. Cramping, bleeding all the time, every day. They started me on progesterone, which my old gynecologist wouldn't do over the long run. And so I started on progesterone. I stopped bleeding right away, which was good. And but I was still spotting. The ultrasound. Oh, so adenomyosis. Great diagnosis. Could be resolved through menopause. I'm like, okay, maybe we can make menopause happen or something. Anyway, a month later, still taking progesterone, still having bleeding problems, but managing that through progesterone manipulation, calling the team and getting help with that. Finally have a follow-up with the new expert doctor, and she says, this is not normal. It's time for a hysterectomy. We're worried. There could be something else going on that we're missing in the uterus, so it's time. I cried. I didn't want that to happen. Plus, I live alone. I didn't have anybody help. So that was rather shocking. But I told myself, if I need to, I'll have a hysterectomy. I just didn't want to just because. So that gave me a reason to say yes. And I talked to my brother, and him and his wife are going to help me out. So that's great. My friends are going to help. So that's great. By the way, the expert said when I went to see her the first time, she said they should not have done an ablation at my age, 57, because I'm too old for an ablation because then it scars the uterus tissue and you can't see if something else going on, like cancer or something. So that was not a good treatment. Plus, if we had a clear ultrasound, which that doctor did not have a clear ultrasound. We had a foggy ultrasound that was miserable, just stupid, and you couldn't even read it. But this clear ultrasound at the University of Washington Medical Clinic showed much more. And for adenomyosis, I looked it up. One of the causes can be trauma to the uterus, as well as some other reasons, all of which I've done and had. I had an abortion at 25. I was on antidepressants for a long time. Let's see what else. The continuous birth control. I don't know if that contributed. There was something else that I've also could have contributed. I can't remember what else. But anyway, so if you re-traumatize the uterus when it's already caused by trauma, the adenomyosis, that's not good. It makes it worse. So I had to re-traumatize my traumatized uterus. That's not good. So that was not a good step. The good news is it covered my year's deductible. So now I'm going to go ahead with the hysterectomy. I got a date yesterday of August 30th. Today is July 16th. Good news is I've spent all of my out-of-pocket for the year in my health care, which is very expensive. So hopefully it won't cost much more for the year. That'll be good. And it's going to go through the University of Washington, and I'm happy about that. And hopefully we'll take care of this once and for all. I've been through 3-4 years now of bleeding, cramping, bleeding problems. Oh my God, iron treatments, anemic. And I'm still bleeding and cramping, so I don't know if I'm anemic. I get my blood checked again next week, so we'll see. But I'm excited to finally have it taken care of. Now, it's a little longer away surgery than I was hoping. I was hoping like second week in August, but oh well. Maybe that's a good thing. We'll find out. So I'm going to get the surgery, and then it'll be at least a 6-week kind of recovery at least. So it's going to be laparoscopic, I hope. We'll find out, but I hope. So I should get over it relatively quickly, but I won't be able to lift weights, won't be able to do CrossFit. I'll be able to walk, won't be able to run for a while. So I just am making plans to get everything ready, get everything I need ahead of time, get the house ready, get everything I need. Um, Let everybody know that can help and stuff. And then I plan to walk little by little, walk Ginger, my dog, and recover. So that's the plan. It's a bummer to be out of the fitness game for a while, but I'm sure I'll be back to the fitness game. I have till August 30th to be in the fitness game, so I'm excited about that. And enjoy my life till then. And then I'll have a break and I'll let you know how it goes. So just want to update that. Okay, bye.